Wimpy looks skimpy.
Well, you see, I'm fat and you're ugly, but I can diet.
In a recently unearthed journal, Johnny Carson wrote words that still send chills down anyone who reads them. He spoke of a list of names he wished he'd never known. Not nobodies, but Hollywood's brightest legends. To the world, they were untouchable icons. To Carson, they were dark souls hiding behind a glittering mask. Page after page, he described a world of secrets, incest, abuse, betrayal, and stars willing to crush anyone to protect their fame. The question everyone asks is simple. Who was on Carson's blacklist, and why did he decide to expose them only now? The first name will shock you: Marlon Brando. To audiences, he was the calm and commanding godfather. But Carson saw someone else entirely: cruel, selfish, and frightening. Behind those eyes, Carson once said, isn't wisdom. It's cruelty. Brando fathered at least 11 children, but instead of love, his home was chaos. His daughter Cheyenne once confessed bitterly, I never had a father. I just had a selfish man the world worshipped. Her life ended in tragedy after accusing her half-brother Christian of abuse. The scandal grew darker when Christian later shot and killed Cheyenne's boyfriend, a crime that landed him in prison and shattered what was left of the Brando family. Cheyenne spiraled into depression and ended her life at just 25. Carson believed the blame fell squarely on Brando himself, an irresponsible father who built a dynasty of pain. But the torment didn't stop at home. Brando's love life was infamous, not just for its chaos, but for the way he weaponized intimacy. Rumored to have lovers ranging from actors to politicians, Brando used promises of roles as bait. One actress recalled, he promised me a part, and the next day acted like he didn't know me. Women described him as violent, jealous, even beastly behind closed doors. Hollywood whispered about his casting couch, where refusal meant the end of a career. To Carson, Brando wasn't just flawed. He was a monster who left destruction wherever he went. His children were ruined, his lovers scarred, and his colleagues crushed under his power. Audiences remember The Godfather. Carson once muttered, I only remember a father who drove his daughter to suicide. Between genius and monster, Brando chose to be a monster. And as shocking as that sounds, Brando was only the beginning. Because the next name on Johnny Carson's list wasn't a father, it was a mother. A Hollywood queen whose children would later call her a monster, Joan Crawford. Carson once recalled seeing her at a Beverly Hills party in 1973. He took a long drag from his cigarette and said, I've met a lot of unpleasant people, but I've never seen a woman who turned into a demon so fast once the cameras were gone. On stage, Crawford dazzled, draped in jewels, commanding the room like royalty. Carson would even bow to her, but off stage, the mask slipped. In 1965, she once smashed a glass of ice against a wall because it wasn't cold enough. The shards cut her assistant, who fled in tears. Crawford calmly checked her lipstick in the mirror and walked out moments later smiling like an angel. Carson leaned to Ed McMahon and whispered, That's not a human. That's a monster who knows how to act. But the true horror of Joan Crawford wasn't how she treated her staff. It was how she tormented her own children. She adopted 4, Christina, Christopher, and the twins, Kathy and Cindy. To the public, she was a doting mother, even landing a 1947 Life magazine cover, smiling with her children in a sunny garden. But behind closed doors, it was all an act. The truth exploded in 1978 when Christina released her memoir, Mommy Dearest. The book shocked America. Christina revealed she and Christopher were beaten with wire hangers, tied to beds, and punished over the smallest mistakes. At just 10 years old, Christina was dragged out of bed in the middle of the night to realign clothes hangers in her closet. If they weren't perfect, she was whipped with a leather belt. Christopher, only 7, was once tied down to learn obedience. The twins were forced to scrub floors and toilets daily, living in constant fear of their mother's rage. Why would Crawford be so cruel? Many believed she never adopted for love, but for publicity. After divorcing Clark Gable, her career was slipping. Adopting children turned her into the perfect mother on magazine covers. A former housekeeper later confessed, "Those children were props. When cameras were around, she posed with them like ornaments. When doors closed, she turned them into slaves." Rumors grew darker. Some claimed Crawford drank heavily and punished her kids by locking them in dark rooms for hours. Neighbors recalled hearing screams from her Bel Air mansion, but no one dared intervene. Christina's friend once said, "Kathy and Cindy lived like child prisoners. Every day began with fear." Crawford's personal life was just as scandalous. Gossip columns accused her of breaking up marriages with affairs, and leaked letters hinted at a secret romance with Barbara Stanwyck. To Johnny Carson, this was the worst betrayal of all. "A mother who can turn her children into prisoners," he once said, "is more wicked than any villain on screen." And yet, Crawford wasn't the darkest name in Carson's journal. Because the next one wasn't just an abusive parent. He was a man America worshipped as a gentleman with a golden voice. Yet Carson believed he was nothing more than a mafia boss hiding behind a microphone. Frank Sinatra. To the world, Old Blue Eyes melted hearts with his music. To Carson, he was a demon who bullied, threatened, and used the mob to keep people terrified. Sinatra loved humiliating his staff. A simple reminder like 3 minutes to air could send him into a rage, grabbing a man by the collar and snarling, "You want to lose your job right now?" Even hardened veterans trembled around him, because everyone knew crossing Sinatra meant crossing the mafia. He also preyed on young artists. Many recalled being invited to join his tour, only to discover they were shoved into 2-minute opening slots, paid so little they couldn't even cover their hotels. And if they dared complain, a knock on the door at midnight reminded them to keep quiet. Sinatra's mafia ties ran deep. In the 1940s, drowning in gambling debt, he turned to Sam Giancana, the Chicago mob boss. Giancana cleared the debt, but in exchange, Sinatra was forced to perform in mob-owned casinos to launder money. What looked like a favor became a lifelong contract with the underworld. The mob made him a star, and in return, Sinatra became their golden goose. But his cruelty extended into his personal life. He was notorious with women, and multiple lovers accused him of forcing abortions to protect his image. One showgirl said in 1975, "He told me his career mattered more than a child who shouldn't exist. I cried in a hospital while he was singing in Vegas, hailed as an angel." Even Sinatra's family couldn't escape the wreckage. With his first wife, Nancy Barbato, he had 3 children, Nancy, Frank Jr., and Tina. But the marriage collapsed when he flaunted his affair with Ava Gardner, one of Hollywood's hottest stars. And that was only the beginning of the chaos tied to Sinatra's name. In 1951, the Los Angeles Examiner called Frank Sinatra's divorce the biggest family explosion of the decade after that. His life spiraled into endless affairs, from Marilyn Monroe to Angie Dickinson and countless others. To Carson, the real sin wasn't the cheating. It was how Sinatra treated women like disposable objects, keeping them when he wanted, discarding them when he was bored, and never seeing them as human beings. Sinatra also wielded fear like a weapon. Journalists who criticized him paid the price. A New York Post reporter once revealed that after writing an unflattering piece, he received a chilling midnight call. "Don't let your daughter walk to school alone anymore." By morning, the article had vanished, and the newsroom went silent. Everyone knew who was behind it. Carson, usually restrained, didn't hide his disgust. "People hear him sing and think he's an angel," he once muttered. But I sat beside him and learned he was a demon in a suit, with an army of darkness behind him. If Sinatra spread fear through the mafia, Shelley Winters terrorized Hollywood in another way. She turned every set into a battlefield of alcohol, tantrums, and chaos. To the public, Winters was a two-time Oscar winner. To Carson, she was a woman who fed on humiliation. On The Tonight Show, a simple question like, "How have you been?" would explode into rants about men, politicians, and even her colleagues, exposing affairs and secrets live on air. Carson once admitted it felt less like an interview and more like a trial. Backstage staff feared her outbursts. They'd hide anything breakable before tapings, knowing her temper could send objects flying. On British TV, she once hurled a glass of wine at Oliver Reed and coldly said, "I did it because I wanted to." But what Carson hated most was her twisted view of love. Winters thrived on scandalous affairs, often involving married men or protégés she tore families apart with. When exposed, she sneered to the press, "Weak men lose their wives. Don't blame me for her. Destroying lives was a victory." Rumors swirled that she traded intimacy with powerful producers and politicians for roles, and then bragged about it at parties. "She could take any man she wanted," one actress said bitterly, "then tell the story like it was a joke." Winters's cruelty, Carson believed, came from her terror of being forgotten. When younger stars rose, she clung to relevance through scandal. But those scandals left real people broken. After one taping, Carson sighed, "Some people try to make an audience laugh. Others make them cry. Shelley makes everyone feel humiliated." To him, she wasn't just dramatic. She was a monster who found joy in the pain of others. And yet, even Winters's chaos was nothing compared to the next name. A man who didn't just sit on Carson's stage, he tried to take it over. Orson Welles. To audiences, he was a genius storyteller with a voice that commanded silence. To Carson, he was an emperor who despised everyone around him. In one infamous 1970 taping, Welles casually ripped up the script in front of the crew and launched into a 20-minute monologue, ignoring every signal to stop. Carson tried to interject, but was brushed aside. At one point, Welles even ordered a cameraman to change the angle live on air, treating Carson as if he were just a piece of furniture. But behind that brilliance was a personal life drenched in cruelty. Welles had 3 daughters, Christopher, Rebecca, and Beatrice. Yet those close to them said they grew up abandoned, little more than props for photo shoots. Rebecca later admitted her father cared more about fleeting lovers than his own children. His love life was equally destructive. After leaving his first wife, Virginia Nicholson, he married Hollywood goddess Rita Hayworth. Their 1943 wedding was hailed as America's dream wedding. But it quickly crumbled into misery. Welles cheated openly, even rumored to have slept with Hayworth's close friend. The betrayal devastated her, driving her into alcoholism. And Welles's scandals didn't stop there. Many young actresses later claimed he lured them with promises of roles, only to trade them for nights in Beverly Hills hotels. And yet, as horrifying as all this sounds, the darkest secrets Carson uncovered about Welles were still to come. An insider once confessed to Vanity Fair, "He told me I was his new muse. But when I refused to sleep with him, the role vanished overnight." There wasn't even an attempt to hide it. Everyone in Hollywood knew the phrase, Welles's casting couch. If you wanted a role in his films, you paid with your body. European tabloids whispered about Orson Welles' reckless personal life, affairs with married women, flings with starry-eyed newcomers, even rumors of a love triangle with a producer and an unnamed actress. All of this tucked away behind the image of a film genius. To the world, he was a visionary, but to those who knew him closely, he was nothing more than a predator. Johnny Carson hated Welles's arrogance the most. He once muttered to Ed McMahon backstage, "At least the fakes try to hide it." Welles doesn't. He despises everyone, staff, audience, all of them. To him, only Orson Welles matters. And if Welles turned his talent into a weapon, then Carson's next guest used faith, morality, and beauty as her shield. Her name was Jane Russell. Jane Russell was the Hollywood archetype, seductive, fiery, with sharp eyes, and a body that turned her into Howard Hughes's multi-million-dollar obsession. To the public, she was a goddess. To Carson, she was a demon in disguise. Backstage at The Tonight Show, staff still whispered about the day a gay makeup artist lightly fixed her hair. Russell snapped, "You pervert! Don't let your demon-possessed kind touch me." The poor man fled in tears while she calmly adjusted her dress and smiled sweetly at the camera. As if nothing had happened. It didn't stop there. She once demanded a pastor to cleanse the makeup room because a lighting technician was openly gay. She declared, "If you don't exorcise this room, I won't step foot in it." Carson saw it for what it was, cruelty disguised as faith. On stage, she crossed the line. Carson had seated her next to Rock Hudson, a beloved Hollywood star. Russell sneered, "I'm not sitting next to that fake man." Her words, aimed at Hudson's sexuality, froze the studio. The audience gasped. Carson blushed with rage. In front of millions, she had turned The Tonight Show into a stage for public humiliation. Russell's hate didn't stop with the gay community. She openly mocked the civil rights movement, dismissed equality laws as a joke, and allegedly refused to sign contracts if a black crew member was present. One black actress later said, "Jane Russell made us feel like we weren't even human." And behind all her sermons about morality? A private life filled with scandals, affairs with politicians, producers, even married actors. She preached purity while drowning in hypocrisy. Eventually, Carson had enough. "I don't pay anyone to come here and humiliate my staff," he told his team. "The audience comes to laugh, not to witness contempt." From that day, Jane Russell's name vanished from his guest list. To the public, she was a goddess wrapped in silk. To Carson, she was a ghost spreading nothing but bigotry and disgust. And just when Carson thought he had seen the worst, he faced another guest, a sharp-witted screen legend who made millions laugh on stage, but behind closed doors turned her children's lives into a battlefield of violence and bitterness. Her name was Bette Davis. Bette Davis's rage didn't stop at sharp words backstage. Makeup artists, servers, even fellow guests could become her targets the moment she felt overshadowed. But the darkest side of Davis wasn't on stage. It was inside her own home. She had 4 children: Barbara Davis Sherry, known as BD, Margot Merrill, her adopted daughter with an intellectual disability, and 2 adopted boys, Michael and another Margot. To the world, Life magazine covers showed her as a devoted mother. In reality, she was the complete opposite. In her 1985 memoir, My Mother's Keeper, BD described her childhood as endless trials, her mother as judge, jury, and executioner. Love was absent. In its place, insults, punishments, and iron control. She dictated what Barbara ate, wore, and when she slept. Once, when Barbara dared to talk back, Davis locked her in a dark room for hours, ignoring her desperate cries that echoed through the mansion. The most tragic story was Margot. the daughter with an intellectual disability. Instead of nurturing her, Davis discarded her, sending the girl to an institution at just 3 years old, barely acknowledging her existence again. For Carson, that was unforgivable. A mother abandoning her own child as though she were broken furniture. It was cruelty he could never stomach. Friends whispered that Davis never adopted out of love, but to polish her image. To the public, it looked like she had balanced career and family. Behind the scenes, those children were nothing more than props in the theater of her fame. Her personal life was no less chaotic. 4 failed marriages, violent arguments so loud neighbors called the police, and rumors of secret affairs with both men and women in Hollywood. Young actresses even whispered that Davis's mentorship often came with a price. When she lost interest, her protégés were cast out of Hollywood's inner circle. Carson once admitted over dinner in Palm Springs, "I used to think she was just sharp. But then I saw she wielded bitterness like a weapon, against colleagues, against friends, even against her own children. Some people play the fool on stage, others bully with power. But Bette Davis, she destroyed her own family." And as shocking as that was, the next name on Carson's blacklist was even more disturbing. A child star who once embodied innocence and charm, only to grow into a man consumed by alcohol, depravity, and abuse. That name was Mickey Rooney. For decades, Rooney was Hollywood's golden boy. The Andy Hardy films of the late 1930s and 40s made him America's sweetheart, so much so that Time magazine crowned him the nation's youthful hero. But Carson knew the truth. By the 1970s, Rooney often stumbled into The Tonight Show studio drunk, his shirt stained with wine, tie crooked, laughter vulgar. Instead of sharing warm stories, he rambled about crude exploits, leaving the audience in stunned silence. Carson swallowed his fury to keep the show alive. Backstage, it was worse. Female staff dreaded him. He'd grab arms, whisper lewd comments, even make women cry. Some begged to be reassigned just to avoid him. Once, Carson personally apologized to a young actress harassed by Rooney, even while cameras were rolling. And then there were the whispers. Stories of teenage girls lured in with promises of tutoring or movie roles, only to find themselves trapped. The mainstream press stayed silent. Rooney was an icon, after all. But in the industry, everyone knew. He's not just a drunk. He's dangerous. His private life was a storm of broken families. 9 children from 8 marriages, most of them scarred by neglect, drunken rages, and domestic violence. Tim Rooney once confessed, "My father was never there." What we remember are arguments, crying, and the nights he came home drunk. Even Ava Gardner, his first wife, summed it up. He was a handsome nightmare. Every marriage after followed the same pattern: betrayal, abuse, addiction. Carson once sighed at a party in Palm Springs, "Imagine having to smile at a man you know made women cry just off stage. That's not a legend. That's a disgrace." To him, Mickey Rooney was living proof of Hollywood's darkest truth. The same industry that builds idols in a few years can just as easily let them rot into monsters for life. And yet, Carson's blacklist didn't end there. Next came an actress whose beauty and glamour hypnotized the public. On stage, she shone like a queen wrapped in diamonds. But behind the scenes, she turned every crew member into her servant, bending them under the weight of insane demands. Her name was Zsa Zsa Gabor. But Johnny Carson, who faced Zsa Zsa Gabor multiple times, knew the truth. Beneath the glitter and diamonds was a ruthless woman who treated everyone as pawns in her power games. From the very start of her Hollywood career, Gabor saw marriage as business, not love. She married 9 times, each union with a businessman, a prince, or a millionaire. The Los Angeles Times once wrote, "Every one of Zsa Zsa's marriages was a contract. She walked away with villas, cars, and diamonds." One ex-husband admitted bitterly, "She never loved me. She only loved my assets." When ambition failed, violence took over. In 1989, she slapped a police officer across the face during a traffic stop, a scandal that rocked the nation. But her worst outbursts were reserved for her home and The Tonight Show set. Former staff revealed she hurled ashtrays, glasses, even furniture during her tantrums. On Carson's show, her diva demands became legendary. The dressing room had to be exactly 74 degrees. Her Perrier water required 3 ice cubes, not 2, not 4. If something was missing, she locked the door, screamed threats, and sent crew members scrambling across Beverly Hills to fulfill her whims. Once, over a missing French foundation cream, she snapped, "If I don't get it, I'll ruin this taping, and Carson will remember my name forever." Even Carson, a man who had endured every kind of guest, admitted defeat. She turned the crew into slaves, all for the illusion of perfection. To the public, she was a glamorous queen. To him, she was a gilded nightmare. And yet, if Zsa Zsa tormented crews with impossible demands, Jerry Lewis infuriated Carson with something worse: hypocrisy. 10. Jerry Lewis, the man who used charity as a mask for cruelty. To America, Lewis was the crying clown, the man who raised millions for children with muscular dystrophy. Every year, viewers watched him wipe away tears on national television. But Carson saw through it. At a party, he once said, "That's not compassion. It's an act." On The Tonight Show, Lewis humiliated Carson by adjusting his tie mid-show, interrupting him, and flaunting superiority. Backstage, he belittled crew members. Once, because a cameraman breathed too loudly, he screamed, "You don't deserve to work here. You're a parasite." The man walked out in silence. Carson never forgot it. He could turn a grown man into a humiliated child in seconds. His cruelty was worse at home. His 6 children, including Gary Lewis, later accused him of emotional and physical abuse. Gary wrote in his memoir, "We were props for his perfect father image. We had to smile for photos minutes after being beaten." The hypocrisy was staggering. On camera, he hugged sick children and cried. Off camera, he tossed tissues, cursed at staff, and stormed away without even saying goodbye to the kids he pretended to love. Rumors also followed him, stories of actresses pressured into proving themselves for roles, of private parties that ended with broken promises and broken hearts. To Carson, Jerry Lewis wasn't a saint. He was a demon in disguise. "The audience believes he's a savior," he sighed to a friend. "But all I see is a man who cries at the right time to hide the blood and tears he causes behind the scenes." And if Jerry Lewis was hypocrisy made flesh, the next name was even more terrifying: Marlon Brando. A genius on screen, but in private. A man consumed by lust, addiction, and a family shattered by violence and tragedy. But here's the truth. What Johnny Carson revealed was just the tip of the iceberg. Hollywood is filled with legends who lived like demons, inflicting pain on families, colleagues, and even strangers. If these are the secrets Carson dared to expose, imagine how many remain buried. So I'll leave you with this question. Which name on this blacklist shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below.